Hello there, people. Welcome to another episode of Friday Flight. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me for another round of listener feedback. Back to the weekly schedule. We're going to see how this goes. But we've added a different component here, a new-ish component, because I used to do this on Patreon, and now I am doing it topside here for this show, a drinking component, hence the double entendre with the word flight, if you will. Beer, because I'm a massive beer snob. And I got a new one tonight, and we're going to crack this one open for a special occasion, because it's been a busy week. There's been a decent amount of things that have happened this week, but it's also a somber week, as we found out a couple of days ago, the unfortunate passing of Mr. Val Kilmer, absolute legend with respect to his acting career. Everybody's been talking about him all week, talking about their favorite movies, his favorite performances he's had, and so we're going to pour one out for good old Val here, crack one open here. I've got some Dragon's Milk, the legendary Dragon's Milk, which is bourbon barrel-aged stout. Let's see, what do we got here? 11% alcohol by volume. Brewed and bottled by New Holland Brewing Company, LLC, in Holland, Michigan. You can find them at dragonsmilk.com. Yes, as I've mentioned before, Michigan has a lot of breweries, and I've been to many of them, not all of them, but many of them. But here, let's give this a crack open here. All right. Let's see what we got. Dragon's Milk. Ooh, very sweet. Well, not very sweet, but, sweet enough. And it's a darker beer. But let's see. It says, throughout the ages, Dragon's Milk has been a term used to describe potent ales that were bestowed in celebration at the end of a journey. Our signature stout carries that tradition today. Roasted malt delivers notes of coffee and chocolate. Yep, definitely taste some of that. Married with sweet undertones of vanilla and oak from a 3-month stay in a bourbon barrels to create a truly legendary blend of flavor. Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all, truthfully. I can definitely taste that. What is it? The vanilla and oak, and certainly the coffee, and the chocolate. That's the strongest here for me, but definitely better than that chocolate stuff we tried last week. So here's to Dragon's Milk by Holland Brewing Company, and in tribute to the late great Val Kilmer. May he rest in peace. All right, so we'll deal with a bit of that for the rest of the show, but let's dive into your listener emails. There are quite a few that have come in just today with respect to our new weekly deadline, our new/old weekly deadline. So we begin, of course, with John R., who's got a couple of emails this week. His first one titled, "The Reality of the Situation." And so he says, "When I saw you repost someone posting about how Man of Steel is a masterpiece on Threads, I saw a comment saying it's a disaster piece, and that this Superman would never let thousands of people die, he would always find a way," and then shared the, in sarcastic tone here, original concept of comparing him to Homelander. Ah, yes, that lazy bullshit, of course. He says, "I pointed out some holes in his argument, and then he started comparing Cavill to a Superman comic. What's wrong with truth, justice, and the American way when he tries to stop someone from killing themselves, and then another comic where he holds up a Klansman? You can't compare Superman on the first day of the job to an experienced Superman. In the DCEU, there was no one else to teach Clark how to be a real hero. Diana, Arthur, Barry, Victor were either rookies or not in the public sector, and Batman was a jaded veteran. He had his dads, but they didn't have any prerequisites for superheroics. He had to figure out how to be a hero on his own merits." But John says, "The other thing people have a hard time accepting is whether it's a more edgier Superman or a Thor as a comedic character or Hulk being nerfed, is that we, who at least have some familiarity with the comics, struggle to realize that the primary demographic at the end of the day is the casual movie-going audience. It always has been. That's what it is now and always will be. Yet, yes, when they do something that resembles the comics and both fans and casuals enjoy it equally, that's great. That's what helped the MCU remain stable until Endgame, but that's not the consistent reality. Like, I understand wanting your heroes to be a perfect representation of the comics on the big screen, but they're not always going to be near 100% accurate," he says. Like, for me, when Spidey makes a big deal with Mephisto, with Mephisto to erase his marriage in one more day happens, it hurts as a comic book reader, because this is the timeline where the original version of the character came from, and him doing something so out of character because the writers don't think he's relatable anymore since he's married makes me in good conscience not want to buy any more issues. if Spider-Man did that in the movies, it probably wouldn't be as hurtful because we know that this version isn't going to be around for 18 years like the 616 comic version of the character. Movies are Elseworlds, and that's something I've come to accept. Yeah, there's a few things with respect to that. I mean, first of all, the laziness, the Homelander comparison is such bullshit. Like, anybody that just lazily compares Cavill's Superman to Homelander, you're trolling or you're a dumbass. Seriously. Like, they couldn't be any further different, right? Not just in terms of concept, but in terms of, like, how they're orchestrated and what they do. I mean, Cavill's Superman is not a murderer. He did not laser anybody on an entire, like, causing a plane crash and like throwing caution to the wind with respect to innocent civilians in that regard. No, it's rationalization is what it is. Rationalization from people that didn't like that interpretation of Superman and want to just explain away and rationalize their hatred and their dislike in that regard. So that's bullshit. Yes, he was absolutely a rookie and he was 36 hours on the job. It is what it is. It also goes up with that laziness, like, oh, he never saved anyone. He spent the whole first hour of the movie saving people, but because he wasn't wearing the cape, it didn't count, apparently. This is how basic bitch a lot of these fans are that have an issue with this. But I will say this: as much as these movies are geared towards the casual audience, there is one thing that I've never understood this with fans, comic book fans, right? That want to be so beholden to the source material, especially with a character like Superman. There's over 80 plus years of source material for Superman, and it's all different, right? Like, if we were to take John Byrne's Superman, which I personally have not read, and we were to compare that to the original Siegel and Schuster stories, right? Or if we compared any of that to Dan Jurgens, who I have read, Dan Jurgens is my favorite Superman writer. If we compared any of that to Peter Tomasi or any of the other, or Brian Michael Bendis, they all have different takes on Superman. So when you're talking about comic accuracy, which is it? Like, where are you at? Like which version are you choosing for this 100% accuracy rule that you want to pass on here, right? Like, I've never understood this. I've never understood the stubbornness with respect to this whole comic accuracy argument because there's so many different continuities, right? There's different versions of these characters that we see not only in the comics but also in the animated series and live action, whether it is cinematic or on television, and they're all designed for whatever story is being told by the creatives, and they're not all identical, right? Like, they're not all the same in terms, I mean, there are basic tenets that they get down, right? Like the S shield and the costume itself, the origins, and most of the abilities. But they change a lot of stuff around to suit the actual story that is being told. And it's like, okay, well, if you're picking one continuity, that means that you're not accurate to the others. Which one do you pick? And since nobody can answer that question, because the real answer to that question, if you ask a fan, is whatever continuity they grew up with, whatever continuity they want. So for most of the movie people, it's Superman the movie from 1978. It's that continuity. They want Superman to be exactly like Christopher Reeve in that regard. But then you have the Snyder cultists who want it to be exactly like Henry Cavill. My point is that they're all valid. And this idea of trying to maintain comic continuity with all adaptations, whether they're Elseworlds or not, like even if they weren't Elseworlds, it's still fool's gold to think that you're going to remain completely comic accurate like 100%. It's literally impossible because you can't take all interpretations and throw them into one. Now, I do think that James Gunn is probably going to take as many like inspirations as he can from different runs and put them into this movie, hence the legacy part, of what this movie was originally called, Superman Legacy. Like, I do think he's going to try to do that, but as far as being 100% comic accurate, literally impossible. From an objective sense, impossible. Like, you can't do all of it at the same time. So you got to pick a continuity. And that's why with movies, they make their own continuity. And guess who does not care about any of this continuity stuff with the comics? The general audience, the casuals, the ones who are like, hey, new kick-ass Superman movie, let's go check that out, and could not care less how you feel or how anybody else feels about comic accuracy to whatever run of Superman or whatever other character that you are beholden to, that you are, cherry picking for, because that's all it is. It's just cherry picking, right? You're saying that you have a preference over others, but that doesn't make you right, and it doesn't make others wrong in that regards either. So yeah, movies are all Elseworlds, and if fans cannot accept that, then they should stop watching them. Seriously, if you want 100% comic book accuracy, read the flippin' comics and shut up. as far as I'm concerned. That may be blunt, but because it is blunt in that regard. Tired of, I just don't have time for fandom foolishness like this anymore. Those people just get blocked, hidden, and muted as much as possible. But so that was John R's first email. Let's see about his second email. Here's a shorter one. He said, "Okay, so the Batman scaring Affleck's kid thing. Oh yeah." He said a funny story about that. Shortly after the film came out, Batman v Superman, that is, I had three adults in the backseat of my car when I first started driving Uber, and the dad in the backseat is on the phone with his son. Dad asks what he's up to, and the kid responds with watching Batman v Superman, and the dad responds with, again? I couldn't help but smile, so yes, it does depend on the kid. Oh, absolutely. Like I said, there were kids in my theater when we went to go see it on opening day or day before, like opening week, and no one left. There were no kids crying. There wasn't anybody freaking out. Like, no, if anything, you know what? Like, okay, whose Batman is scarier? Be honest here. Whose Batman is scarier? Affleck's or Pattinson's? As far as the movie is concerned. Because there's a lot of, like, thriller, scary, creepy shit, like, in the Batman, right? And I wondered, based on, like, what they were doing and how things were going, and, from the moment that movie starts and you just see the Riddler standing there in the dark, waiting to bludgeon the mayor, right? It's like, okay, how is a family going to handle this? And in that theater, there was a family. I think I mentioned this in my original review. There was a family. Only reason they left the theater was because the one kid had to go to the bathroom, and they came back. And they finished the entire movie, right? This was a mother and like two or three boys, something like that. So, yeah, it totally depends on the kid. I'm not going to judge Ben Affleck or his son for how, he behaved or how he reacts to it, because I'm sure there are other kids just as fearful, just as much as there are kids who are not fearful, like the one you're talking about who, can't get enough of Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Hopefully he was watching the Ultimate Edition and got the full movie as it was originally intended. Fingers crossed. I'm sure he didn't specify over the phone while you were in the car. So John also sent some home movie footage of him at age 5 playing the top loader NES console, which what did he called it, the two loader. But yeah, it this makes me feel old, John. You know why? Because that is like the redesigned model of the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, that didn't have the same vertical hold issues that people like me had with the original. I grew up with the original. I was like 6 or 7 when the original came out, and I had one. Had Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, right? Had the combo with the blaster and all that. And yeah, just the fact that you were 5 playing on the redesigned one that came out a number of years later. Yeah, I really don't need my hairs to turn any more gray, man. What are you doing? Come on. Yeah, just so long ago. All right. How about this? John R's he did send an email about Val Kilmer. R.I.P. to Val Kilmer, and some questions. He said, sad to hear about Mr. Kilmer. His roles as Jim Morrison, Iceman, Batman, Doc Holliday, Moses slash God, and so many others will all go down in history. Don't forget Krisha Hurlis from Heat. Put that up as well. Also, his recent stint as Blunt Man in Jay and Silent Bob Reboot was cleverly put in, but also a little morbid. I didn't see Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. Interesting. He says Batman Forever will always be a movie I'll watch if it's on. I really do hope Warner Brothers has plans in place for the Schumacher cut now more than ever. I will see Superman for Val, because if the film is a success, Gunn will have the autonomy to make it happen. I wonder if he'll get an in memoriam photo in the film. Well, I mean, he would if for Superman, or not for Superman, but for if they did the Schumacher cut. Yes, he certainly would get an in memoriam in that regard. But no, not for Superman. There's no reason for that. But on to the questions that John has in this email. He's got a few here. Oh wow, okay, a little bit wordy. He says, 1, I like your new format. I do wish I didn't have to wait 2 weeks, but it gives me time to think of questions. This one's a doozy. You don't have to wait 2 weeks. We're going to weekly. So let's get to it right now. He says, so I've been thinking a lot about the Jurassic Bark episode of Futurama again, which I think is in your top 2 favorites. Well, not quite my top 2 favorites. I am in the, and I don't know if I'm in the minority on this or not, because I've heard people go either way with this, but I think the more emotional episode of Futurama, for me personally, is Luck of the Friarish. Like, the ending of Luck of the Friarish gets me every time, seriously. And more so than Jurassic Bark, because of how Bender's big score changes some things with respect to Jurassic Park. And that's all I'll say about that for anybody that still wishes to remain in the bubble about Futurama. But either way, John says, I have an issue with Jurassic Park. Seymour knew Fry was frozen. I have no idea why he waited in that same spot for 12 years when he knew Fry couldn't get out. It doesn't make me sad anymore. It makes me angry. He knew where he was, and I thought, what are you doing? Seymour is a smart dog. I don't know why he didn't look for him again. You know what I would have done? Seymour returns to the building Fry is at after some time has passed when Fry's parents took Seymour away from frozen Fry. He barks at someone in the hall to let him out of the cryo chamber. Someone calls the pound, and Seymour is taken in. He's adopted by a new family, and he's taken in for a time, but then he sees they live across the street from the cryogenics lab building and can see Fry through the window. He barks to the family, but they're confused. Eventually, the family moves upstate to Long Island, but Seymour doesn't keep staring at the building while the car drives away, scratching at the window. He tries to escape to find Fry, but is thwarted by the family or the pound. A few years go by, and the family thinks he needs to get fixed for something, and then he runs away from the vet. He jumps in a truck, and the truck happens to be going to New York City. He's lost in the city and doesn't remember where Fry is. After weeks of searching, he finally finds the building, but it is under renovations. He still manages to get in without any problems. He's gotten old at this point. He goes into Fry's room and stays by his frozen master. He finds food here and there and goes back to the room like it's his new home. About a year or two goes by, and the place is done with renovations. Seymour is found dead, sleeping next to Fry's chamber. I personally think it adds more weight to Fry's decision not to clone him, because at the very least he had a chance at that life Fry assumed he had, but at the same time Seymour never forgot him and was at his side for his final moments. Now, would this scenario have made the situation more sad in your opinion, Ray, or would it have made it less soul-crushing? I understand it's only a 30-minute show, and they had to get their points across, and I guess Fry's time double being there helped make it better to an extent. I just think there could have been more to the story than Seymour waits for him to come back when he knew that was unlikely. Would be interesting if they ended up doing a sequel, even if it could retcon. You could have it that he didn't die in the final shot. He went to sleep. He went and woke up and found a bus that had Fry being a poster mascot advertisement for cryogenics. He gets on the bus and then goes to the room to be with Fry one last time. Love to hear your thoughts. I don't have much to say about this, John. I really have just one thought. Bender's big score, settles all this for me. And, since you've already brought it up, that point, this is why I don't think Jurassic Park, me personally, it's not that emotional of an episode for me anymore. I mean, the ending is heartbreaking, but for me, once Bender's big score happened, that was my quote-unquote retcon, if you will. And I think it was their retcon. I don't think they're ever going to touch on the Seymour thing like that again, because they're done with it. What they did with Bender's big score resolved it, completely, as far as I'm concerned. Seymour didn't die, you're petrified, sad and whatnot. No, the timeline was changed, and he got to live more years when Fry's time duplicate came back. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's over. It's done, and, whatever other alternate scenarios there are, I don't need them, because they already gave me one with Bender's big score, and I was happy about that. And this is a big part of why I don't get as emotionally connected to Jurassic Park as many others, because that movie, which is completely in canon, and it's a movie, so it was longer than your standard 30-minute episode, that movie completely resolved it for me. And I don't need any further explanation. I don't need any further elaboration on it. I'm good with what they did in Bender's big score. The Seymour thing is resolved for me personally, subjectively speaking, with that. The whole, so when it comes to, the more emotional episodes of the show, and look, could I argue, I see your point with respect to Seymour not going back to the cryogenics lab, but I also get why he waited at Panucci's. One, it's more dramatic because it's a TV show, John. It's not going to be, the idea is that when Fry was frozen, it wasn't just, remember, it wasn't just a case of, he was locked in there for 1,000 years, and it wasn't that they just forgot about him. It's well, could they open him sooner? Well, perhaps, but you also have to remember who was guarding over him the entire time. Nibbler? Right? Remember, the Niblonians needed him to remain frozen for 1,000 years. So there's that going on. And we learned that in the Why of Fry, which I don't remember if that was before or after Jurassic Park. But there are other forces at play that kept Fry frozen that Seymour would not have been able to stop beyond just trying to get Fry unfrozen. Nibbler would have memory wiped him or done something. And maybe that's what happened. Maybe you can use that as a headcanon to help you sort through it, John. Nibbler memory wiped him because he needed Fry to stay frozen in that regard. That's that's my thought process with that. If that will help you out, I think that can help you with respect to your resolution with it. For me, my resolution is Bender's big score. What happens in that movie absolutely resolves Jurassic Park for me. So I'm good as far as that goes. So it was a bit of a longer answer than I thought, but it's still a simpler answer, I would say. But on to your second question in this email. You said, on Threads, someone asked if there was a DC movie not named Batman in the last 5 to 10 years that has above 70% on Rotten Tomatoes for whatever that site's worth, not much, that didn't have any Batman appearances. I said Blue Beetle and then mentioned Wonder Woman, Shazam, Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, and the Suicide Squad, when I realized it was the last 10 years and not 5 until he moved that goalpost, but then he changed his answer to it doesn't count because most of those flopped, and I pointed out that what it wasn't what he was asking, and then I saw he kept responding to me with multiple variations of how DC has flops. Me, 5 movies in the DCEU that aren't Batman related are critically 70% or more approved. Threads guy, most of them still flopped. Me, so what? You got your answer. Threads guy, floppity flop flop. Me, unless this is an April Fool's prank, F off. Threads, grown man angry, they still flopped. And so on and so forth. I just blocked him. This person clearly had the brain of a 7-year-old was trying to troll, John says. I thought he was being silly because it was April Fool's Day, but now I'm sure he was just trying to get a rise out of me. Do you think he was trying to get attention? Yes. Yes, I do, John. You said either that or he's one of many people on social media that would end up getting ADD from spending too much time trolling. John, I'm being nice. I'm really trying to be as nice as I can here. Stop talking to these people. Stop it. Seriously. For your own mental health, to protect your own peace, John, stop it. Just stop it. You know what? Like, the moment, here's as far as I would have taken it, seriously. The moment I answered his question and he said most of them still flopped, I would have gone, oh, not what you asked. Clearly you don't want a conversation. Have a nice day. And I would have blocked his ass. And I would have let it go. All this other nonsense. There's no reasoning with these people, John. Stop trying to reason with them. It's seriously, man. I can't be more direct with you about this. Stop talking to these people. You have mentioned multiple times how on Facebook and on Threads and on social media, you keep running into these trolls. Well, you're inviting them in, man. You're letting them waste your time. Don't engage them. Leave them alone. Like, seriously, like, I only go maybe 1 or 2 posts far enough with them, right? Or you know what I did today? Here, I'll give you an example. Today, what do we do? Like, remember how we talked about when this new Superman movie comes out, one of the biggest things that we're not looking forward to, those of us that are rational Zack Snyder fans, we're not looking forward to this is so much better than that Murderverse Snyder crap Homelander copy, right? We're not looking forward to people weaponizing James Gunn's Superman film to attack Man of Steel, to attack Snyderverse films, right? And it's already started. Because you see on Threads, right, and all the posts about how, oh, well, finally we get all that dark murderverse stuff out of here, and James Gunn brings hope and light back to Superman, da 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 da. At least 3 or 4 times, I have done the following. I have commented, unnecessary toxicity, you are no better than the Snyder cultists that you claim to hate. And then I block their ass. And the reason I do that is because if I post that under their comments and then I block them, they can't get rid of my post. Which means anybody else that can still see it can respond to it and know that it's there and there's nothing that the asshole can do about it, right? I leave that there. But I block them because I am not interested in any type of faux discussion with them. They are arguing from a place of bad faith. They are trying to troll. They are trying to be toxic. I don't want any part of that. I just want to throw my little time bomb in there, right? And have other trolls react to it. And one of them, actually a few of them, more than a few people have liked the comment and like that I left and agreed that they were being overly toxic and that they didn't need to weaponize. And I've seen more than a few people that are done with this whole fandom where like, who had the better Superman, James Gunn or Zack Snyder? It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. They're all valid. You know, these pissing contests between fans are irrelevant. But my point is, John, I'm not engaging them. Not like that. I'm leaving them alone. Like I will throw one comment and then I block them and I move on. I'm not interested in wasting my time on these assholes. And you shouldn't be either. You keep sending these emails about these confrontations with them and I just feel like, dude, you are wasting your time. You're banging your head against the wall. and you're not helping your own peace whatsoever, and you're letting these people like basically dictate your emotions with respect to this, and we need to stop doing that. We all need to stop doing that. And that was a long lesson for me to learn, because if you go back to my old days on Twitter before it was run by a South African Nazi, I used to really, I mean, I would go back and forth with these people, right? Because I had to humiliate them. I had to make them understand. They don't want to understand. They just want to be trolls, and they just want to be bitches, and they just want to sit in their mother's basement pounding that big ass pile of sand, to get under our skin. Well, screw them. They can seriously take long walks offshore cliffs, as far as I'm concerned. Just block them and move on, man. Don't engage that shit. Say one thing, right? They ask a question, and it's just like MAGA. Think of it that way, John. It's just like MAGA, right? When MAGA people they ask a question, and you answer their question with facts, and then they go, oh, well, it doesn't matter, it doesn't count, I don't care. They do that same shit with Trump. It's the same thing with these people, right? Same exact thing. They ask a question, you give them an answer they don't agree with, they don't want to hear, and they go, well, that doesn't count. It doesn't matter, this and that, whatever. You're done with that person. Done. There's nothing that you can say. There's no reasoning with assholes. There's no reasoning with delusionally impaired people in that regard. So just seriously, man, to protect your own peace, leave them the hell alone. Protect your own peace with these people. Seriously. The less you interact with these clowns, the happier you're going to be. I am extremely confident in saying that. All right, on to your third question for this email. You said, I really do hope Rotten Tomatoes goes the way of MySpace in a few years. The only reason I pay any attention to that site is how the audience score turns out. That is the only rating that should matter. And you know what someone had the cojones to say? Audience opinions are for those who have done nothing with their lives, which is very disgusting and insulting, because there are people I know who are very successful and intelligent who disagree with the critics often. You're also very intelligent too, and I know you have at least one degree. All we can do is mute and block. In fact, I have a new motto. Let me know what you think. Don't engage and turn the page. Oh, that's cool. That's good. And I appreciate the compliment, John, but if I were being completely honest with you, I don't currently have any degrees. I am on the cusp of finishing a few, but it's been a couple of years I've been at that now. So I don't currently have any degrees, but I thank you for the compliment. With respect to the idea of Rotten Tomatoes going the way of MySpace, here's the problem with that. If I Google who owns Rotten Tomatoes, like I forget who owns who owned MySpace back in the day. But the owners of Rotten Tomatoes as listed by Google are Warner Brothers Discovery and Comcast. Warner Brothers Discovery has a 25% share, Comcast has a 75% share. What does that mean? It means that the studios on some level control that site, and they use it for their own marketing purposes. So unfortunately, because they funnel it as an opportunity, this is why you see tomato meter scores in like TV spots and on like marketing, like certified fresh when you buy a Blu-ray or whatnot. It's because the studios own it and the studios use it as a marketing tool. And it's bullshit, and I don't like it. It's corporately controlled, and it's, all of the other things that I hate about it. But unfortunately, that's why it's not going to go the way of MySpace, because the studios are going to continue to manipulate it for their own purposes, especially Comcast, Universal, and Warner Brothers Discovery. So that is it for that, if you will. Do you have one other email, John? Yeah, there was this one other one. You said Mr. Russ is correct. I'm not sure where you got this particular. It looks like Facebook that you got this one from. Somebody quoting, why would the sun hurt Superman? He gets his powers from the sun. And they said it's also how he heals, Knucklehead. Were you not listening to the Kryptonian robots? Did you pay attention to what was wrong with him? 14 fractured bones, bladder damage, kidney, large intestine, and his lungs. All that is going to heal with the sun. No shit that's going to hurt. You'd all be crying like babies, maybe even passing out from the pain. Get the F out of here with that. Also, yeah, Krypto was hurting Superman because, he's a Kryptonian too. And yeah, Krypto is hyperactive because he's a dog. Yes, all of that I 100% agree with, right? All the people are looking for reasons to trash this movie before it's even released. We know why, and we know they're stupid. They're just as stupid as the people who weaponize this movie against Man of Steel and the Snyder films, right? They're all cults. They're both cults, right? We've got two cults. I will continue to say this, and I will continue to reiterate this on threads and everywhere else on social media. I may even make videos about this someday. We have two cults, people. We have the Snyder cult that wants to hate this movie with a passion no matter what, and we have the anti-Snyder cult that wants to use this movie as a weapon to destroy and attack and viciously eviscerate the Zack Snyder trilogy, which they can't do because there's nothing that they can say or do that will ever erase that trilogy out of existence. Ironically, if they would shut the hell up about that trilogy, it might actually vanish out of the cultural existence, but it won't so long as they keep bitching about it. And we're going on 9 years. 9 years and counting, they will continue to be bitching about it. And that's the silver lining that we can get out of them constantly, attacking it is, oh, well, that'll never die. And I've already mentioned when I talked about the extended Superman preview on Patreon yesterday, I mentioned how I can see elements of all the different Superman, including Zack Snyder. There's some Man of Steel and BVS in the stuff that we've seen so far with respect to James Gunn's Superman. And by the way, to date, Henry Cavill has still smiled more as Superman than we have seen David Corenswet smile. Have we seen David Corenswet smile at all in any of these particular previews? Maybe the one where he's flying. Maybe that one clip where he's flying is not even a full smile. It's like a smirk, right? But all these other clips, I mean, we've seen him bruised, we've seen him broken, we've seen him bleeding, we've seen him screaming in pain, we've seen him brooding in anger, we've seen him trying to remain stone-faced as people throw canned goods at the back of his head, we've seen every emotion but happiness. And yet, I'm not hearing anything from the people that he should smile more. I'm not hearing anything from those people. Because as long as it's not Zack Snyder, they're okay. Yeah, double standard. I guarantee you, there are elements of what Zack Snyder did in Man of Steel that James Gunn is going to incorporate into his Superman film, because I've already seen them. In terms of visual things, in terms of the orchestrations with the character, and how the story that they were telling, there are definite things that are taken from the Zack Snyder influence, right? And Zack Snyder's influence also comes from certain, different parts of the comic runs. Because again, there's multiple Superman comic runs. Which one are you going to use? You're going to try and blend as whatever one's inspired you as a creative and tell a story that way for the screen. That's what Zack Snyder did. That's what Richard Donner did. And that's certainly what James Gunn is doing now. So there you have it. I think that's all of your emails for this week, John. Thank you for sending in the feedback as always. We're going back to weekly. Just letting you know, the deadline is going back to weekly. Friday FLITE is the weekly feedback show. For future reference, good sir. All right, we're talking Superman, and as I say this, Hollywood Reporter posts a story about how the new Superman footage has divided the internet. Superman doesn't whine. Whatever. I'm sure it's all about the social media nonsense with respect to Superman crying in pain from the Saharan Prime situation. But we're talking all this Superman, and we have to bring in Wally Mustafa, our resident Superman superfan. He sent this email with no subject earlier today. But he's got a lot to discuss, Superman included. He says, "Hey, Ray, first of all, let's raise a glass for Val Kilmer. May he rest in peace." Yes, indeed. "I had no idea he had been battling cancer, and then he lost his life to pneumonia. And at 65 years old, which is not old when you think about it. I saw the post you shared on Threads regarding his last appearance in Top Gun Maverick. Talk about emotional. The outpouring of tributes has been amazing to see. But for those twits complaining we shouldn't honor Val's work as Batman, they can just be blasted into the sun for all I care. I remember him as Batman more than I do as Iceman. So yeah, I will celebrate him as Batman. Don't tell me how I should remember someone." Spot on, Wally, you. Absolutely. The people gatekeeping about that bullshit. Talking about why you don't bring up Batman Forever. He was a Batman, not the Batman. Okay, bullshit. Whoever that is. It's all subjective. Somebody, and plenty of people on this earth that we inhabit, grew up with Val Kilmer being their Batman. Grew up with Batman Forever being their favorite. In fact, over at Squadcast Media, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, like that continuum, Batman Forever was like, those were the movies, the Batman movies that like one of my podcast brothers, Jordan, he started with those, right? He saw those before seeing 89 or Returns, okay? He started with that Batmobile. He started with Kilmer. He started with Jim Carrey as the Riddler. He started with Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face. He's an example of who I'm talking about. Do not tell them how to mourn Val Kilmer. F off with that. Absolutely. Could not agree more with respect to that. It's funny. You're not the only one, not funny, but like, you're not the only one, Wally, that said you didn't know he was battling cancer. I knew about the throat cancer. I knew a number of years ago that his health had declined, but apparently that wasn't all that public of a story. But yeah, I was definitely aware of it, which is why I wasn't surprised at the situation, that they, posited him in with respect to Top Gun Maverick. But either way, yeah, that was a very emotional scene. I am glad, like I said on Patreon, I'm glad that he got to be in that film and that he got to have that moment with Tom Cruise in that film. No doubt about it. It's the most emotional part of the movie by far. It's a very good movie, I should also add. But continuing with Wally U's email, he says James Gunn dropped the sneak peek for Superman on Threads yesterday. That came out of nowhere because I was planning on seeing a Minecraft movie on Sunday as I heard that the preview would be playing ahead of the movie. Now I don't need to. Man, July 11th cannot come quickly enough, he says. Again, I agree with everything you said about it, especially how it looks and borrows elements from Donner, Snyder, animation, and comics. Also, I think the robots are actually called by their numbers as opposed to Kelix or Kalor. Look at their chest and you will see they have numbers on them. Alan Tudyk's robot is called 4, I believe. Yeah, no, he did mention that. So is that a thing in the comics, Wally? Like, are there times where the robots are numbered? Like, is there any precedent for that? I mean, to me, I don't care. It's not a big deal if he is or not. I mean, if that's his name for, great, awesome. Point is, he's got a team of robots that help him out in the Fortress of Solitude. I like that. I do. I like that. And that whole sequence in the fortress, I really did like that sequence a great deal. And again, and what Wally was talking about, I did an episode of Flight Chat yesterday, or Flight Speed rather. I did an episode of Flight Speed yesterday for Patreon where I did give my thoughts, my brief thoughts on the Superman teaser, or the extended preview, if you will. And I did talk about how, I've said this before about DC movies, and we can talk about this because another thing that they're getting blasted for, if you will, is the humor. Is this going to be a stupid comedy? Well, here's the problem, Snyder cultists. DC movies are much better, in my subjective opinion, with situational organic humor than Marvel movies. I think Marvel movies do one-liners and quips. DC movies do more situational humor. And I can point to several examples of this from the DCEU proper with the Snyder stuff and that era, and even from the Walter Hamada era of wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, all over the place shit, right? Like, DC just does organic situational humor better, in my opinion. And that's what I feel we saw in this extended preview. I didn't hear any one liners, I didn't hear any quips. This was organic situational humor. Crypto jumping up and down on him. That's a hyper dog. Like, hey, come on, get up, let's play. Not realizing, yeah, he's in pain, Crypto. It takes him a minute to figure it out. And then he realizes, he keeps saying, take him home. All right, let me take him home, right? Crypto takes a minute to process it, as a dog would. Come on. Doesn't matter if the dog's from Krypton or not. He's still a dog, okay? He's going to act like a dog. But at any rate, that was funny. And then just the whole, like, when the new Robot 12 was like, oh, he looked at me. Like, whatever. It's so innocent and innocuous. It's like, seriously, why are we... Fans suck. Anyway, moving on. Wally says, we watched the latest episode of Daredevil Born Again, and I listened to your review. All I will say is there's not much more I can add to what you have already said about the episode, other than to say, and before I continue the sentence for Wally, spoilers, spoiler warning, spoilers for Daredevil Born Again. This is your spoiler warning. We were talking spoilers. Yes, spoilers are fair game here. Okay, that is your warning. Now I will continue. He said, all I will say is that there's not much more I can add to what you have already said about the episode, other than to say that I think Heather will figure out that Matt is Daredevil before the season ends. That's if Fisk doesn't have her strung up for revealing his task force didn't kill Muse first. Yep, 100% agree. Heather is in danger. She is 1000% in danger. And we'll see. But I also agree with you. I don't want that dramatic irony. Like, if they're going to pull the amnesia thing and say that, she had head trauma and she doesn't totally remember, it's foggy for her, no pun intended. Okay, fine, I guess. But don't make her stupid. She's a psychologist studying masks. She should figure this shit out. At this point especially, right? Like, Matt saved her ass. Or it helped her take Muse down in that regard. But yep, she's in danger, so we'll see what happens. He says, I still cannot believe people are having a hissy fit about CinemaCon. Like you said, it's not for us fans or even general audiences, it's for the exhibitors. Sure, we can get excited about what's been announced or not, as is the case with some people, but if you were someone who decides to have a gripe about what's been announced or not announced, you need to get a life. All this is to say, just calm down, people. Not everything that gets announced needs to be spoken about or talked down. If you are not happy with what has been announced, just say that and move on. No need to give us a damn dissertation on it. Boy, social media is really becoming a pain at times. It is, and we can mute and block all those people and all those stupid ass takes. But I will say this, fans, it is clear that fans can't help themselves a lot of times. And our impatience knows no bounds, especially when it's a franchise that we're really connected to, that we just cannot get enough of, right? The impatience is going to run rampant. And it's a double edged sword, right? Because on the one hand, you want them to announce everything, like, so you can get hyped up and excited about the future of the massive universe. Because listen, let's be honest, there are still those of us that want an MCU level of success for DC. We want that. We do. I want that. Most certainly, I want that, right? And not just for conversational purposes, but because DC Comics is my preference, and I want to see them do as well, if not better, right? And can that happen? I mean, perhaps, to the level of what the MCU has done for the last 17 years, I don't know. I really don't know, especially with the way that everything is changing with the medium and the industry and the economy, of course. We'll see how things go. But I think that's where a lot of the disappointment comes from, Wally, is we want that slate announced, but by the same token, we don't want it announced in case things fall through, right? So there's the impatience, hinging upon our logic in that regard. It's like, well, it's a good idea that they're holding back, especially since this isn't really aimed for us. But still, as fans, we want the slate announced because we dearly, desperately want that level of success for DC Studios. Those of us that are rational DC fans and, aren't into all this infighting bullshit because it's not Zack Snyder. Either way. But yeah, I hear you on all that for sure. He says, want to give a massive shout out to Stuart Little for talking about the Absolute editions of DC Comics. I'm reading Absolute Superman and have picked up Absolute Flash. He's my second favorite superhero. Loving what I am reading in Absolute Superman so far and cannot wait to start Absolute Flash. Yes, Stu had a very comprehensive recommendation for the Absolute DC series last week. That definitely got me interested in reading them. So I may try to see how I can pick those up, and read them one way or the other because I am intrigued with what he said. Stu did a good job. Stu did a damn good job pitching it, to be honest with you. He pitched a couple different books, truthfully, that are intriguing. But Wally says, anyway, that's going to do it for me. Oh, update on Micah and his potty training. Going better than when he first started. Okay, good. Still a few accidents here and there, he says, but he's feeling more confident and letting us know when he needs to go. He still wears a nappy overnight, but he's not even done anything in the nappy. Fingers crossed he will be fully nappy-free sooner rather than later. You take care and give my best to Shonda, and you both enjoy the weekend. Thank you, Wally Mustafa. Thank you for the kind words, as always, Wally. You give my best to the other half and the family, indeed. And good news. Glad that Micah is progressing in his potty training. Good sir. All right, next up is Alex De Silva with his Interested in Star Trek series, but of course he's got thoughts on many other things. And he starts off with Star Wars here. He says, hey Ray, so since we're only a few weeks away from the premiere of Andor's final season, I decided to give the show a rewatch. The first time I watched through the show, I enjoyed it and thought it was good, but man, after binging through it this most recent time, I'm now of the opinion that Andor is the strongest of the Star Wars shows, like by far. The writing is just so good, and the show works so well when you don't have to watch weekly and you have all the episodes in front of you. One episode ends and you're just dying to move on to the next one. Can't wait for season 2. Based off trailers and the very last scene of season 1, he says when Cassian basically told Luthen something along the lines of, kill me or take me in, it's looking like we're going to see a very different side of Cassian in season 2. It's looking like he's going to be all in on the rebellion compared to season 1 when he was mostly just operating out of his own personal interests. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, because he's got to get to Rogue One Cassian. Rogue One Cassian was all in. Rogue One Cassian was basically the one that brought Jyn Erso in, right, for the final push to get the Death Star plans in that regard. So, yeah, he's evolving towards that. We had the discussion, many of us had the discussion when Andor Season 1 released. People then considered it, on the first watch, the best of the Star Wars shows. And I would agree with a caveat. And that caveat is this. And I'm not saying you're doing this, Alex. I'm just saying in general, people that look at Andor Season 1 and go, this is what all of Star Wars TV should be. No, it shouldn't. No, it should not. Star Wars television should be just like what Star Trek television is becoming. Different flavors for different types of the fan, for different types of the audience. It should not all be homogenous. It should not all be the same. So I like the fact that The Mandalorian is different through its 3 seasons. I like the fact that Obi-Wan Kenobi is different. I like the fact that Ahsoka is different. I enjoyed the Book of Boba Fett and The Acolyte. I want different tones with respect to Star Wars shows. And you know what? This also reminds me, before we get to Andor Season 2, Alex, I gotta binge watch Skeleton Crew. I do. I wish to binge watch Skeleton Crew, and I will. And I'll probably review it on an episode of Flightbox for Patreon, no doubt. And speaking of Flightbox, Alex says, great to hear you're going to continue weekly Flightbox episodes with Andor. Are you aware of the release schedule? It's looking like it's a 12-episode season with 3 episodes dropping every Tuesday night. We're basically going to get a new Star Wars movie for 4 weeks straight until the show's finale. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, because it's already kind of tough, with my schedule. And listen, everybody's schedules are different. And I know that in the past, Alex, you've been one of those to say, well, if it's important, you've got to make the time. Yes, I get that. But, it's not always that easy to watch 1 episode, let alone 3 every night. This is going to be a challenge. It is. I wasn't aware of it originally, but I did look that up recently. It was like, oh, well, shit. Okay, we'll see how this goes, because, it's not like Andor is just this incredibly empty show. Like, there's a lot, right? There's a lot happens in these episodes. And if you're talking about, in chapter form, okay, cool. Like, for storytelling purposes, I would be intrigued to see how that goes. But that's a lot of episodes for me to watch, like, when I get home from work every day. I will remain committed to it as far as Flightbox is concerned, but we'll see how that goes. That could really get unwieldy really fast, depending on how my schedule goes. Hopefully, the universe helps me out on that one, but we'll see. But he says, speaking of the Rebellion, I just recently found out that there's a new podcast called Pod of Rebellion, where the voice actors for Hera, Sabine, and Ezra are doing a rewatch of Star Wars Rebels and sharing the behind-the-scenes making of insights. Well, looks like I now have an excuse to rewatch that show too. And since you brought them up, Alex, that gives me an excuse to mention each of those voice actors by name. Vanessa Marshall, who is the one that plays Hera Syndulla, Tia Sircar, who is the voice of my favorite character from Rebels, Sabine Wren, and Taylor Gray, the voice of Ezra Bridger. And it is moderated by John Lee Brody. It launched on March 11th, it looks like. It's produced in partnership with iHeart Podcast. Yeah, not that we need any excuse to rewatch Rebels. Don't threaten us with a good time. But yeah, this is a good enough excuse with respect to that. Fantastic show. Rebels was absolutely outstanding. Talk about emotional endings, no doubt about that. He also says, I've been hearing that Marvel is planning to make a Young Avengers show. This should be a movie, no? The general audience sees the Avengers brand as this big, massive event that must be seen in theaters. Couldn't releasing an Avengers branded show be a lost opportunity? I disagree. Here's why I disagree. When we talk about the general audience seeing the Avengers brand as big, it is abundantly clear to me, and it should be clear to all of us, that they see that Avengers brand as being certain people, right? Why do we think they're bringing Robert Downey Jr. back as Doctor Doom? And why do we think that they're now bringing back all these other actors, right? That's what the general audience is looking at as Avengers. Young Avengers, so we're talking about Yelena, we're talking about Haley Steinfeld's character from Hawkeye, whose name escapes me at the moment, and we're talking about Riri Williams, Ironheart, right? That grouping, well, think about it. Yes, I understand that, Yelena was introduced in Black Widow. I get that, but she was in Hawkeye, and the other characters made up from the Young Avengers, especially if you're going to include Ms. Marvel, like they're from the TV series. So quite honestly, I don't look at it as a lost opportunity. I look at it as another Defenders. Right? Remember Defenders? Remember when they brought together Luke Cage and Iron Fist and Jessica Jones and Daredevil right after they had all had a couple seasons of their shows and they made Defenders? That's what this seems like to me, if this actually happens. Have we gotten official word on this? I have not seen Feige or anybody from Marvel Studios give official word on a Young Avengers show. So always be careful what your sources are, Alex, for this information, because I don't know that this is 100% confirmed, to be honest with you. But no, I do not think it's a lost opportunity. And quite frankly, at this point, after seeing what has gone on with the Marvel Cinematic Universe to this point, like theatrically, I think that Marvel Studios thinks that TV is the safer bet for anything that isn't an instantly recognizable character from the original Avengers grouping. Because unless it's that or a team up, I think they're skittish now about releasing some of those films in theaters, right? Because look at what the Marvels did, or rather didn't do. Look at what Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania didn't do, right? So no, I don't think it's a lost opportunity. I think they're hedging their bet, and I think they're playing it safe. Again, if this is real, like if this is actually going to happen, and we will see. I will wait for official word on that one, as I do with anything with respect to this. All right, into Star Trek. Alex says Amr, our newcomer Amr Zadan, to the feedback circle. He says Amr is blazing past me when it comes to Star Trek. I normally watch about an episode a week, so he's going to get very far ahead of me at the rate he's been going. Looks like I'll have to be the one dodging spoilers now. Yeah, it did seem like he went further than you did. That last catch up, that last watch update he posted was like, oh, okay, no, he's more than halfway through season 3. Okay, all right, he's gonna get to the best of both worlds. Oh my goodness. Well, I cannot wait till we get to that one, Alex. But let's talk about what you watched this week, which was The Vengeance Factor. That's an intriguing episode. The Akamarians, yes. The Clan Trelesta and the Gatherers. Oh, yeah. He says, I wonder if the synthetic food that the Enterprise creates actually tastes like the real thing, or if crew members occasionally get tired of it and start craving the real thing. I think both. I think that as far as it tasting like the real thing, I think that it's like the real thing taste is like synthesized, but it's not quite organic. Like, you know how you can taste something, you're like, okay, this kind of tastes like, meat, but it's not quite meat in that regard, right? Like, just there's something slightly off. It's passable, but it's not authentic. And so that's when they start craving the real thing. That's when they get the real, the real stuff, the real food that they do cook on this show at times, right? So I think I think it's a little bit of both in that regard. He says the part at the end when Riker just kept shooting Yuta as she tried to approach Chorgan was kind of brutal to watch. Although I'm not gonna lie, it was unintentionally hilarious when his kill shot just vaporized her, like literally disintegrated her. It might have been a bit more effective for the moment if she had dropped dead to the floor, but instead I was laughing when I wasn't supposed to be. Yeah, I think that's more on you, Alex, because if you remember correctly, Yuta had to be destroyed because that virus that she had, all she needed to do was touch Chorgan. So there couldn't be a body. A body could not be left behind. That's why he set the phaser to maximum. If Yuta wasn't going to go down and they could beam her away from Chorgan, he had to vaporize her so that there were no traces of that pathogen left to threaten Chorgan, right? That's why he said, Commander, I am in your debt. So the vaporization was necessary in this regard for Yuta. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not sure what it says that you laughed at it like that because I've never found that scene funny, to be honest with you. But it is what it is. It's all subjective, I suppose. You said, I was wondering if I'd seen the actress for Yuta in anything, and when I looked her up, I found out she played Alice in Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and 5. I wouldn't know. I have not seen those. I don't know that I'm going to visit that particular horror franchise. I know I just reviewed Hellraiser. I did a couple of weeks ago on Patreon, but I don't know about Nightmare on Elm Street. If I even think about those, if I even think about trying those, that might be much further down the road. There's a number of other movies and even horror movies I would like to get to before that. Alex says the next episode he's got is called The Defector. Best, Alex. Oh, The Defector. That is very intriguing. Very, very intrigued to hear your thoughts on that particular episode, which, yes, Amr has already watched that one because I think that was part of his watch update a week or so ago. So, yeah, careful with spoilers with respect to Amr's emails. Amr, if you're listening, keep going at your own pace, man. It's all good. Not a problem whatsoever. We will navigate it accordingly. Don't wish to stifle any of your watch updates, good sir. But yeah, Alex, just tread lightly. No doubt about it, for sure. But thank you as always for the feedback. Looking forward to more of your thoughts on TNG and everything else. Before I get to our last email here from Jared, there was one comment on Flightbox 36 for Daredevil Born Again Episode 7 from at Julius9346 that I did want to bring up because, like I said, I want to pay more attention and not miss any comments on the Flightcast YouTube or on the Facebook page. And Julius9346 was saying, and again, spoilers, more spoilers with respect to Daredevil Born Again. Here's your spoiler warning again. Here we go. He says, I hope that was a copycat Muse or something because killing Muse that fast is kind of whack. To be honest, the build-up could have been better. Yeah, I've seen this sentiment again, and I mentioned in the episode in Flightbox 36 that I don't have any feelings strongly one way or the other about it, truthfully, because I don't have the the connection to the comic book version of Muse. It's not a character that I'm familiar with because I haven't read any Daredevil comics. I'm just uninitiated in that regard. So I don't have any strong feelings with respect to, oh, I can't believe he's already gone. They could have stretched him out further. And I also still think that that is a part of the thinking that, like, oh, well, there should be a big bad for this season and he should have been the big bad, right? And it's like, I think this show is going deeper in a couple different levels for that. It's not necessarily a like a stereotypical big bad in that regard. I think this is clearly like we're following Matt Murdock and we're following Wilson Fisk, right? We're following Daredevil and Kingpin in terms of their journeys as characters as they are both reborn, as they are both born again throughout this show. And, again, we know we're getting a second season, which is currently in production. So, I think there will be other characters and other like villains and other antagonists that show up between now and the end of season two. But yeah, I don't think they were intending to do something long term with Muse. And like, as far as him being a copycat, no, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me like they're done with that arc, and he served his purpose as far as being, like I was saying, that bridge to bring all of the major characters together. Like, he was the focal point, the turning point, if you will, the thing that brings Matt, Heather, and Kingpin together, like, unknowingly, like, in that regard, and puts them all in each other's crosshairs, if you will. So yeah, we'll see. I don't know. Never say never, Julius. But thank you for the comment on Flightbox, good sir. All right, let's customarily close things out with an email from Jared Cardos titled CinemaCon, Daredevil, and More. He says, "Hey Ray, congrats on episode 200 on the main show. While you've definitely made way, way more than just that, it's still a nice, fun, round number to have." Yes, you are right, Jared. I have made way more than 200 episodes of podcasting just on my own solo efforts. If we go back to Squadcast Media, we talk about all the episodes of podcasting I've done with Brent and Tim, Scott, Jordan, and Chris. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a ton. But thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words on the episode 200 round number accomplishment. Yes, sir. He says, "Before I get into CinemaCon and the past episodes, I wanted to show you something that I recently rediscovered that feels like it was made specifically for you." He says there is a comic writer named Stephanie Williams who's recently been popular for writing miniseries for Nubia at DC and more. But before she got into the industry, she wrote a fan webcomic called Living Heroes, a mashup of women in the Marvel Universe like Storm, She-Hulk, Misty Knight, Monica Rambeau, and more with the sitcom Living Single. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Now that intrigues me because Living Single is one of my favorite sitcoms. I watched it when I was younger, obviously, when it actually aired back in the 90s, but I recently, about a year or so ago, rewatched all 5 seasons like multiple times. And I really love that show. It is the original Friends. And you can go down the rabbit hole of history on this. That show was absolutely the template for Friends. People and producers have even admitted that. They basically took that concept and nerfed it for Friends. Friends, of course, went on to be the huge, massive hit and the cult classic and all this, whatever. Living Single kind of lives, not in infamy, but it's just there, and I mean, quite honestly, there's some cultural appropriation stuff with respect to that, but, it's definitely like the DNA of the show is hilarious. And okay, I'm looking at this link that Jared sent. Wow. Okay, so this is yep, this definitely looks like it's right up my alley. I thank you for bringing this to my attention, Jared. I need to look this up. Okay, you said Storm, She-Hulk, Misty Knight, and Monica Rambeau. Okay, yep. I am interested. I am intrigued. I'm gonna go look this up. A fan web comic by Stephanie Williams called Living Heroes, modeled off of Living Single. Great. This sounds like something that I may read like soon. Thank you for that, Jared. I appreciate that. All right, let's get to the rest of your email. He said, "It's funny. I was wondering about what Lanterns could do to have some connection to the DCU and never considered Nathan Fillion coming in as Guy Gardner. Definitely looking forward to seeing Guy in what will probably be a darker, more serious atmosphere. Guy in the comics can definitely be a jerk and an aggrandizer, but he's also shown to be a good guy to have in the core when things are bad. And I think we might get to see more of that in him here. Yeah, and I also think that Nathan Fillion, for all of the comedic stuff, I think he can play that, right? Because there's obviously, if you watch any of his TV series like The Rookie or Castle and certainly Firefly, he has some more dramatic chops in him. I mean, he can do the humor, he can do the funny, goofy stuff, but he definitely can turn on the emotions and do the more dramatic thriller stuff. So I don't have any doubts of his ability to be able to play both tones, right? The tone that he's going to play Guy Gardner with in Superman, and the tone that he's going to play him with in Lanterns, with Kyle Chandler and Aaron Pierre. I don't have any doubts that he will be able to pull it off. I'm just intrigued to see how they're going to merge them. And again, I applaud DC Studios for, having the cojones, if you will, to just go ahead and say, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to merge these two together. They're two different tones, but they involve lanterns, and this is going to be our connection, like with respect to that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with that and how Fillion plays that between the two. Jared says, I agree with you for the most part in regards to the talk about Daredevil and Ms. Marvel being able to work together for the most part. The only thing I slightly disagree with is Kamala coming in at the last minute with an F yeah or something in this season. For one thing, I don't really see Kamala being the type to consciously be swearing like that. For another, it would still feel a little random. If anything, I think something better would be a full-on team-up with Matt and Kamala in Season 2. The two have never really interacted in the comics, but there's a great team-up story with her and Wolverine that could be a good foundation for it. And he did send a comic panel with the two of them interacting. This is Daredevil in his yellow costume, which I guess is akin to the one... Wait, is that Daredevil? It almost looks like Wolverine the way that he looks with the horns and whatnot. Interesting. The color scheme is what's really throwing me off on that because it's like black and yellow in that regard. But either way, Jared says, that said, I can also think of two reasons why that wouldn't work. For one thing, since we're getting X-Men in the MCU fairly soon, why copy-paste Daredevil on this story when Kamala could have that adventure with Logan for real? Oh, that is Logan. Okay, I see. Okay, so that was not Daredevil. That was actually Logan. And he says, second, I think if Matt is going to be mentoring any teenage girls, it's probably going to be Angela as the new White Tiger. Potentially. But here's the thing. I'm not talking about anything involved, Jared, with respect to that. And, I don't want to make assumptions on what they're going to do with Logan for the X-Men. First of all, I need to see what they're going to do with the X-Men. Because all I know right now is that they're bringing the OGs back for Doomsday and Secret Wars. I have no idea what their actual designs on the MCU's X-Men are going to be. For all I know, they could go with one of my Dark Horse ideas, which is to make Laura the Wolverine of the MCU. They've already made enough changes with respect to canon, and I know that there's some diehard fans that would absolutely not like that choice and want to see another Wolverine cast to, and there are probably plenty that just want Hugh Jackman to literally play the character till he's 90. I'm sure there are plenty that feel that way as well, but I need to see what they're going to do with Wolverine first before knowing exactly, could she have that adventure with them? But either way, it's just a point of connectivity with respect to, all right, he's in Hell's Kitchen, she's in Jersey City, and, let's not have all of our TV series just set off in their own worlds. Let's do some crossover. And I don't mind Matt being the crossover person. I don't. He was in She-Hulk. If he decides to be in Ms. Marvel, I'm not mad at it. I would be curious to see where they would go and what they would do. And I wasn't suggesting that he mentor her in that regard. At least I don't think I was. I don't think I mentioned that. If I did, then okay. No, that's not what I meant with respect to him taking her on it, because it's a different set, right? She's got powers. He does not. So it's not the same. She is more superhero than vigilante in that regard, especially since she has now worked with Captain Marvel and Photon, Monica Rambeau. She's already worked with them before. So yeah, she's more of a superhero than a vigilante. So no, I don't think that they would, I wasn't suggesting that. At least I didn't intend to suggest that. Yeah, if he mentors anybody, it probably will be Angela, but we'll see what happens with respect to her progression. She seems like she's headed on that path. But Jared says, and since we're already talking about it, thoughts on episode 7. All right, spoiler warning again, Daredevil Born Again, spoilers, okay. He says, I liked it for the most part. I agree it's definitely more of a plot mover, but it moved to some potentially interesting places. I was surprised by Muse's death, but it works in this story. I've seen people complaining about it, like how they're taking away the main villain so early, which is weird to me because clearly Fisk is the main villain. Yes, I would agree. In fact, I wouldn't even call him a villain. I'd call him the antagonist at this point. Also, without going into comic spoilers, he says there are ways for Muse to come back if they want to. I'm also worried for Heather. I'm curious to see how Matt handles that and if she eventually figures it out. While her comics counterpart is very different, she does eventually discover the secret, and it doesn't go well, to put it lightly. Well, there you have it. That's all the more reason for me to be concerned about this particular version of Heather, to see what happens in this continuity, in the MCU Earth, if you will. But we'll have to wait and see. We got 2 episodes left for this season, and then on to next season, which is currently filming. He says, now on to some CinemaCon news. The Beyond the Spider-Verse getting a release date was great to see. Looking forward to seeing that in 2027. I just hope that the animators aren't going to have as much of a crazy crunch time to make this like the last one. They shouldn't, hopefully. I mean, I don't know how much work they've been doing on it to this point, but yeah, they've got 2 more years, pretty much. So yeah, hopefully there should be no reason for them to be in crunch time. I know Sony can be wishy-washy on that type of production stuff, but hopefully they will have more than enough time to get that done in time for 2027. He says it was also great to get some info on the next live-action Spidey movie, though I will admit that the Brand New Day subtitle gave me a little jump scare at first. I was not at all a fan of the One More Day / Brand New Day era of comics and honestly consider it some of the worst Spider-Man stories I've read. That said, No Way Home was basically an adaptation of One More Day in a way that actually worked, so I'm hopeful they'll do the same here. Plus, I'm definitely curious as to what they'll do with this one, between the mystery role that Sadie Sink has, as well as what it means that it's in between Doomsday and Secret Wars. Yeah, and I have to go back and listen to my review, and because I did review on Patreon, Jared, One More Day and Brand New Day, because I read those, because that was such an infamous arc that so many of you just did not like. And I'm like, okay, so I forget what I thought about it, but I will say that based off of what I remember of it, and based off of what they did in No Way Home, like this is just one of those cases where this is really going to only affect comic fans. This is not going to affect the general audience. It's not even going to affect the audience that has followed the MCU to this point, because Brand New Day is not going to mean anything to them. It's just the next title, right? They're just looking at, okay, Homecoming, Far From Home, No Way Home, Brand New Day. And they'll put 2 and 2 together as far as, well, it's Brand New Day because remember, he's totally different. He's got the different costume and people don't know who he is. They just know that there's Spider-Man, but there's no connection between them and Peter Parker, and MJ doesn't remember him, and Ned doesn't remember him, and all that, right? So they'll put that together and think Brand New Day. And I think clearly, for people that do have palpitations, if you will, that people do have reservations about that title, for fans of the comic that have reservations about it, you should definitely take comfort in the fact that in addition to all comic book movies being Elseworlds, the MCU has built its own mythology over the last 17 years, and it has not been 100% comic accurate in the slightest with respect to any of the arcs that we've seen. Infinity War was not 100% comic accurate. Civil War was certainly not 100% comic accurate, and I can say that with absolute certainty because I've actually read Civil War and all the tie-ins, and I know how different that movie is from what happens in the actual story. Not even close with respect to everybody involved and everything that happens. No. Captain America Civil War is the MCU's version of that storyline. It is not comic accurate. So, Spider-Man Brand New Day, don't think the comic. Don't think that. Think along the lines of what Jared just said. They will make their own story that fits within the MCU mythology and the MCU lore that's their version of Brand New Day. So, you know what? There's a good chance you are going to like it more. Those of you that don't like Brand New Day in the comics, you're probably going to like this one more because, well, it's not beholden to the comics, and it's not such a departure or such a from the character as Tom Holland has played Peter Parker in the MCU, right? So it's not going to have the same effect that the comic had on you in that regard because it's their own lore, the MCU's own lore that they're using to inform this in that regard. So yeah, I think that it will be, certainly for the general audience and the casuals and for people like me that are, not as initiated to the comic. But I think it may even also sway, like, I could just envision, Jared, you and a number of others going, well, this is the Brand New Day I like. This is a good Brand New Day. Why didn't they do this or whatever? Maybe you know why they didn't do that. Of course you do, because movies are not comics. But still, either way, uh, I am not going into it with, like, pessimism. I'm going into it with optimism because I'm curious about the next chapter of what they're going to do with the MCU's Peter Parker. But Jared says, finally, there's Superman. And man, am I glad that I don't have to go through a Minecraft movie to see this. Same here. I had no interest in the Minecraft movie, but either way. He says the footage looks good. Crypto looks like a lot of fun, and the stuff with the Fortress and the Superman robots looks straight out of All-Star Superman. I've got to read that. Yes, got to read that. He says, I also like how the Fortress uses the classic crystal design on the outside, but in a new way, having it form up from underneath the earth and shape more like a crystalline structure. Also, I think the music during the Fortress Rising is what they use for the DC Studios opening they've done for other recent media, like Superman and Creature Commando. Superman, the Christopher Reeve documentary that I still haven't watched. Outside of all that, he says it's interesting that they decided to just expand more on what they already showed in their first trailer. Between that and what Gunn has said on Threads and such, I wonder if we'll get another trailer soon, maybe on Superman Day on the 18th? Fingers crossed. And that should be enough for this one. Looking forward to your future episodes. Thank you, as always, Jared, for the feedback and the kind words, good sir. You know, if I go back to what did James Gunn post? I think he posted something the day that he dropped the sneak peek on Threads. He quoted an account that commented on his original post for the extended preview, an account called Dursif Red 7, who said, so excited for this movie, brings me to tears every time I see this trailer, with a bunch of, teary smile emojis and sunglass smile emojis and fire. And Gunn quoted this and said, thank you so much, though I don't consider it a trailer, more a sneak peek, I guess. I'm actually just finishing up the next trailer for you all now, and oh boy, am I excited for you to see it. So that goes a bit of a way in backing up your suspicion, Jared, that we may see something on the 18th. We may see something pretty soon here, because he doesn't consider this a trailer, and he's right. It's not a trailer. It is an extended preview, but he's working on a current trailer, he says, because the marketing definitely, we're in ramp-up mode here. It's April. We've only got a couple of months until July, and it is time for the big push, the big marketing push to start, right? Which is why they attach this to Minecraft for the general audience, why they release this, over the internet to get us all hyped up and to get the conversation going, even the arguments back and forth about whether or not Superman should be in pain when he's regenerating. Like, even that is marketing for the film. Like, oh, what's this going to be about? Well, let's watch this, or let's hate watch this. Either way, right? To get everybody, to get the juices going and to get everybody's energy up for the new Superman movie that is coming out this year. But yeah, I would say probably we are going to get a new trailer within the next couple of weeks, an actual trailer. And I hear you on the 18th, that being Superman Day. Here, what day on the calendar, day of the week is that? Oh, it's a Friday? Yeah, perfect. Come on, Friday morning, Friday afternoon release. Yeah, definitely. I could absolutely see that. Then we've got weekend chatter with respect to, whoa, how awesome was that first full trailer for Superman, right? And get all that going. Yeah, exciting. My cautious optimism remains, and it's starting to get a little bit higher as I see good things that I like out of what this movie is showing us so far, for sure. But thank you, as always, again, for the feedback, Jared. Greatly appreciated. Looking forward to your thoughts next week, good sir. And that is going to do it for this week's episode of Friday Flight. Thank you to John R., Wally U., Alex, and Jared for your emails this week. And also thank you to Julius9346 for the comment on the Flightcast YouTube page. Definitely watching that for sure. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you so much for your feedback. If you want to join the feedback circle, if you have any thoughts on what we talk about here or anything else with respect to movies, TV, and other assorted media, you know where to find me. Back on Threads and Instagram at the Flightcast, on BLUESKY at Flightcast. There's the Flightcast Facebook page, and of course I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, have a great weekend, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.